Whatever you are doing, if you do it unto the Lord, it's an act of worship.
The power of God is not limited by space or time or anything like it.
There's an exchange that happens where you get his heart and you realize that he loves the Lord. Revival is here. It is happening all around us.
We got Peter Mattis with us today, and Peter is from Bethel Music, Reading, Bethel Church, Reading, Bethel Family, worldwide.
Yes.
It's just amazing how Bethel has just, over the years, just become such a worldwide family, isn't it?
So wild.
And you could run into a Bethel person anywhere, and immediately you feel like
someone who's been or to a school
connected.
or
we're connected. We're family, and so it's so good to have you with us, Peter. And what a privilege it is to just be able to chat with you today about what God's doing and what God's saying. I was just curious. Maybe we can start off talking about a little bit about your testimony. How did you get to be here? Like I mean, you're not an old guy.
Yeah, I'm not.
so you're a young guy, and your passion for the things of God is just amazing. And by the way, Peter is now, you've taken on responsibility as worship pastor at Bethel now. So that's like a whole load on your shoulders.
It is.
But what an amazing thing. So how did you get to be here? Like, just quickly, what is what's your story?
So I grew up in the East Coast. Such an honor, genuine honor, privilege to be here with you all. My first time in Tasmania, but I love Australia so much. It is the land that I felt the Lord so consistently coming back to over and over again, and so it's such a genuine privilege to be here with you guys. I grew up in the Vineyard Church. So my dad was a Vineyard pastor. It was charismania. It was wild charismatics. There were people were shofar blowing and flag waving, and they were in the middle of kind of post Toronto blessing outpouring. If you're familiar with that, where the Holy Spirit really broke out in the '90s in Toronto, Canada. And my parents got connected through there, and then through John Wimber in Southern California, and they started a church in North Carolina on the East Coast of America. And so I was kind of born and raised in the charismatic kind of stream. Literally, as a little kid, would be lying down in like the early 90s. Would be playing hide and seek with my friends among people, literally slaying the spirit. They'd be out, under the power of God, and we'd be like laying next to them, like playing. And so I grew up with the sleeping bag under the first row, kind of in.
That's how my children grew up.
Yeah, exactly. In the first row, in the revival kind of center of it, watching people get healed from a very young age. Randy Clark would come to our church. Bill Johnson would come to our church, and I watched people literally blind eyes open, tumors dissolve, people get out of wheelchairs, and it was normal for me. I thought it was very normal. So I started going to some of my friends' churches, and I'm like, oh, this doesn't look quite like the church I'm used to, Got the longer story shortened would be got kind of hurt by kind of the craziness of the church and drifted away. Really probably needed to find my reality of what I actually believed more than what my parents believed. It had to become my faith.
Made it real for you.
Yeah, definitely. I had to, and so I didn't want to be told what to do. When I was in university, drifted into the party scene, got involved there, and just really, I knew in my deep heart that the Lord was so real, because I'd seen it. And you can't, once you see stuff, I'd seen too much, and you couldn't convince me otherwise, but I just almost needed to test it out and make sure it was real for me. So I drifted away from the Lord, went into just trying to earn success and trying to be profitable in my own strength, and hit a lot of walls. Was wrestling with an autoimmune disease, in my own journey with having seen the Lord healed so many, but yet I wasn't healed personally. And just, is this real? Was this fake? Was this all just hype and emotion? Was it people just just faking it? I so wanted authenticity. I so wanted the real thing. My friends convinced me at the end of my 4 years at a university in North Carolina in America to come with them to Bethel. And I did not want to come. I knew about Bethel. I was like, I do not want to come. They're like, come with us. We're going to go to San Francisco. We're going to do a couple other things. And I'm a surfer, and we were going to go surfing. And so I acquiesced. I said, okay, let's go. And so we did stuff in San Francisco, which was amazing. Got into the car to drive up to Bethel. And this is at the very end of kind of my time just away from the Lord. And I felt him wooing me back, but I was so scared of, I so wanted the real thing. I was so hesitant to really jump back into what I had felt was kind of the craziness. but I knew it was true. Like even in the midst of people's flesh trying to work out the Spirit,
Can't run from
I
that.
knew in my heart it was real. I got into my friend's 98 Honda, barely running kind of thing, ministry school student budget, then drove up to Redding, California, which is about 3 hours north of San Francisco, and I started encountering the presence of God in the back of the car. And I thought I was
on the way there.
On the way there,
wow.
I thought I was containing it. I thought they didn't know about it, and I was mad at the Lord. I was like, "This is not part of the plan. This is not." And I'm literally vibrating like that. And I drove up the main highway there to Redding. Redding's in a small town, 90,000 people. And I walked in, and it was Jeremy Riddle's first time leading worship. If you know who that is, he's a dear friend and brother and a mentor in my life. Wasn't at the time yet, but walked in, and I just wept under the presence of God because I felt the nearness of Jesus, and I felt the real, authentic presence of His love, and just wept under the power of God literally for a week. And it was like the ugly cry, like my friends were apologizing, like, "He's okay, I promise he's okay." Just like I was experiencing the Lord, and I was laid out on the floor for literally about a week, and just repenting for stuff I had done and coming back to the Lord and running. And so long story short, finished up my university degree, then moved out to California, much to my parents' sadness. But let me go out, and I did 3 years of the ministry school there. Got hired in my third year to help out with some of the worship stuff, and then had a variety of jobs, from a sound guy and kind of in the back, like wrapping chords and doing sound, to then helping run our worship and prayer kind of movement, which is called the Worship Room, similar to like a house of prayer, if you're familiar with that. And then went on to become a pastor in our school of ministry for 4 years. Then helped pioneer our online community, which I might talk about here in a second. But we have a school online of our ministry school online, and then here about 6 months ago, have transitioned to becoming back into the worship department and becoming the worship community pastor for Bethel Church Local. So basically, pastoring anyone who's involved in music on any level at Bethel Local within Redding. So guys on our weekend teams, that sort of stuff. So just helping us run towards Jesus together, So that's why I'm here. I've come to Australia several times. This is, I think, my 8th trip here. I love this land so much. I love its people. I love all of it. So
beautiful. Just something before we talk about online. I'm just thinking about your journey when you talk about coming into the church, coming into the community, and your willingness to sort of do those little things, and not just like say, "Oh, I want to be up there, I want to do that," but just whatever you want, God. That's like, maybe speak to somebody who might be watching today who's like, I've got this passion. I feel God has called me to something, but I don't know where to start. I don't know what that looks like for me.
I think for me, I had seen the glittery glamour of the pulpit, and it didn't entice me. The Instagram preacher now, maybe more modern today, which is great. There's nothing wrong with that. And if the gospel's preached, I rejoice. Absolutely.
People get saved, it's a victory.
Man, absolutely. But it didn't entice me. I so wanted real. And so I think when I started coming back to the Lord, the Lord was just like, just start somewhere. Just start somewhere. I loved worship, was scared to death of it probably because I wanted it and loved it so much, and didn't really want to self-promote. And so I just, probably in some false humility, just was like, I'll be a sound guy, and and I'll just rap chords. And I did. I just rapped chords. Wow. But in the rapping of the chord, I found Jesus. And I think sometimes we can so glorify the person who's up front or doing kind of the work of the minister of the gospel. And man, Jesus just came for the simple. He came for the people. The boys that surrounded Jesus were the sinners of the day. Mary Magdalene was a prostitute. Like Peter was a fisherman who was probably known to be conniving and a bit of a cheat. And Matthew was a tax collector who was hated by the Jews, hated by the Christian people of the day, so to speak. And he drew those people to him, and the people that frustrated him were the Pharisees, and the people that were working in the church. And he came for the simple. And I feel like in that the Lord taught me to find him in the wrapping of a chord, in the turning of a knob, or for sound, and just in serving. I work several jobs outside of the church, and just finding the Lord in the simple. Like he's in the grand and the big worship moments and the preaching and those moments when we encounter the Lord in the church. But man, he loves outside the church. He just loves being outside of it. And I think for me, the Lord was just like, just start somewhere. Wherever you go, just start somewhere. Just put your hands to it. And I think the biggest revelation that I really got, even from Bill Johnson, our pastor at Bethel, was one of his biggest sermons is whatever you do to the Lord, if it's a nurse or you're a teacher, you're a stay-at-home mom or dad or whatever you are doing, if you do it unto the Lord, it's an act of worship. And that revolutionized things for me, where I'm like, wait, I can be mowing my lawn. I can be trimming the hedge. I can be doing the most mundane, simple, non-glorious task. And if I do it unto the Lord as an act of worship and glorifying, adoring him, ministering, blessing him, it's worship. And that was where I learned how to worship way beyond before a piano or a guitar or anything else.
I mean, in my journey, I often felt like the Lord was saying to me, it's his love. Beautiful. And his grace that sort of takes us on that journey rather than propel us to the top immediately. It's almost like that. If you can be faithful with the little things, I can trust you with many things. And I feel sometimes people want to miss that. And those, I still miss some of those encounters in those places. The places where nobody wants to go, doing the things nobody wants to do.
And in today's days, we want instant. We want immediate, you know?
And I just think there's real value in that. And sometimes I wonder if that's not part of the biggest deception is we miss some of the beautiful places, the sweet places, the watery places, because we're so focused on getting somewhere. And he's there with us. He's right there in the midst of us. Anyway, so I love that. So
no, it's great, really good.
Obviously, this program goes out to a lot of people that that we reach out to all around the world, but even in outback places and places where people don't necessarily have the opportunity to get to a traditional church or a church where they can be in a community. What would your message be to folks who may be watching today and find themselves in that space? Because obviously you said that you've been quite involved with the online community within Bethel.
I'll give you the shorter version story was about 3 or 4 months before COVID hit, really. Maybe we'd heard rumors of it, but it wasn't really hitting yet. Nothing. We had no idea what was coming. Of course, no one did. But before that, Chris Valentin, who's our associate pastor at Bethel, had this dream to really start and birth the online school. And we had tried to do it for a couple of years, and it never really took off and really ignited. And he really started pushing it a handful of months, really honestly, on the word of the Lord. Obviously not knowing what was coming, but just felt the urgency that we need to do it now. And so we prepared. I didn't prepare, but a lot of the back end and the tech side of the online platform, which is a lot. It's a lot of detail. But they wanted to start this thing, and honestly, Nico, I was against it. I'm not gonna lie to you. If Chris Valentin heard me say this, he would laugh. But I really was against it because I was like, you're not gonna see pastoring online. You're not gonna be able to develop people online. You're not gonna get a true encounter over a screen. Honestly, and I realized in even saying those things, now looking back, I'm like, man, I said, God isn't in a box. He can do anything. But I wrapped my reality around church pews and a seat and a sound system and 4 walls of a church and discipleship having to take place in those things. And Jesus just breaks out from those things all the time. And I had an encounter with the Lord where I saw people literally all over the world, people that couldn't get out of their houses, people that were in countries where maybe Christianity was illegal. I saw people like under their sheets on their bed getting discipled on a computer. I saw people in Eastern Asia where it was illegal to, like, communities of people huddled around. And so I had an encounter with the Lord. I repented. And then we started this online school of ministry. And I realized I had limited the Lord, and he started moving on a screen as powerfully, if not many times more powerfully than in person. And I think without preaching too much, the person that Jesus said had the greatest faith in the entire Bible wasn't actually a Jew. So he wasn't necessarily, in our today's terms, a Christian in that sense. He wasn't someone who knew the Lord in the way that we would say he didn't profess Jesus as Lord and Savior yet. And so Jesus came to him. He was a centurion. He was a Roman guard. And he said, Jesus, can you heal my boy and my servant? It depends on the translation. And Jesus said, yeah, let's go. And he said, no, you don't have to go. Just say the word. I'm a man of authority. I speak and it's done. Yep. And that was the man Jesus was blown away with. It wasn't a religious scholar. It wasn't someone who like had books written in the 10-step plans or whatever. It was this man who didn't even have the understanding of the Father, the nature of the Father, yet he had the kingdom inside of him. Right. And Jesus looked at him and said, you have the most faith of anyone I've met. Yeah. And Jesus spoke the word and this boy was healed in the moment. And I feel like similarly online, for those of you sitting at home or wherever you're at, if you're listening to this, you don't need hands laid on you. If we think the Lord can move only with laying on of hands, he'll move only laying on of hands.
Yeah. But according to your faith.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if we adjust our faith, mine had to adjust majorly. If we adjust our faith to think that, man, it's simply the heart crying out for the Lord. It's if you can hear the words, right? The presence of God is a tangible thing that is not bound to a geographical location. Yeah. You can be on a screen and you can hear because he is omnipresent. In the moment, the Lord can invade. And so I'm really believing for, in this session or future sessions, that really encounters would start breaking out in homes, in offices. For if you can't leave and you need a touch, you need a miracle in your body. If you're in a remote area and you can't leave, if you're for a myriad of reasons not able to come to an actual gathering. I do love in-person gathering. There is something beautiful about beautiful about breaking actual bread with people, sitting down, doing community, the touch and the feel, all that. It's priceless. Yeah. Nothing will replace that. But there is something also to be said about not limiting the Lord. And I'm really believing that the Lord is going to move on bodies, move on minds. Even when I'm speaking, I feel like people who have had mental torment or even labels or disabilities, maybe even chemical imbalances, maybe even diagnosed, maybe undiagnosed things mentally, that even right now, like the Holy Spirit's just going to start touching people and just bring clarity right now. But the Lord's just not limited. So I am a wholehearted believer in this, and you guys listening to this. So,
I guess the big thing though is you decide whether you are a watcher,
great,
or a participator.
Great, yes.
You don't have to be in the same building or
Wonderful,
in the same
Nico.
room,
Yeah.
But if you're a participator, if you're joining in and you're linking together and you're joining your faith together.
Wonderful.
We've been on calls and things.
Yeah, I'd never met you. Case in point. I met Nico over Zoom for a year or two.
And there's dynamic meetings that take place when people engage.
Yeah.
And it's like the power of God is not limited by space or time or anything like it. It can move, but it's how you choose to participate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing with people watching is you can choose to watch a program, but then all you'll ever be is a spectator.
Yeah, great.
But when you choose to join in, then it's as if you're together in the same place. And lovely. So we don't obviously have all day, but and I want to get a little bit in around what you believe God is doing in the world right now. I mean, we've spoken, and there's a real sense that something of the Spirit is imminent. We believe that there's a move of God. It's like the waves of revival are lapping the shores, and we're all like waiting with bated breath. Like, when will it happen?
Yeah,
because it's like we're not if it's in some places it's almost like it is happening.
Yeah, it is.
But the wave comes and it sort of goes and comes and goes. Yeah. But what do you feel? What do you sense? What do you think God is saying at the moment?
Yeah, I mean, so many things. But I think just a couple just off the top of my head right now. Revival's here.
Yeah.
I love that Jesus said the kingdom is here. And it is coming. And there's that kind of dualistic, it is coming, but it's also here.
That's right.
And it's tangible right now. And I think he was walking with, the boys and the disciples in the streets, and he's like, the kingdom. He's trying to teach them. He's like, the kingdom's like that baker over there. It's like the yeast he uses in that bread, and it's like the kingdom's like a little bit of the kingdom gets and works itself into the entire loaf and it affects the entire loaf. And I feel like he had such a way of saying like the kingdom is in the everyday. It's in stuff all around us, and I feel like that is really what I feel like the Lord is really doing, even on the earth, like. Even decades ago, where you almost felt like you had to have a big name preacher, evangelist, or healer come and pray for you to be healed. And now we're seeing people healed on Zoom and online and on YouTube chats, like in the chat watching a session or whatever. And they're like, pain is leaving my body, you know, and they're chatting back and forth. And it's just, I think the kingdom of God is literally here. Yeah. And I think sometimes as Christians, we can wait for this sovereign move of the Lord, which does happen. And absolutely, there are moments, you look back at the revivals of history, and you're like, there are moments when the Lord just dropped, and it opened up. But most of those revivals that I'm aware of started in the place of prayer and started in the place of intimacy with the Lord and a genuine welcoming of His presence into the everyday. And then it maybe started in the church, then broke out into all spheres of influence and different, places of business and that sort of thing. But I feel like within that, number one, the kingdom is here and it's coming, both. Yeah. And so I think we have to find the tension of right now and maybe getting off our butts and doing it, a little bit of like, I'm going to do the good works right now. I'm not waiting for this bang to happen and now I can go and now I'm released, where the Lord's like, no, like you've been released now. Like if you know me, you know Him in your heart, and you profess His name, like go and preach the good news to the ends of the earth, starting with your person in line at the grocery store, or whatever it is, the petrol station. But I feel like that would be the first thing, is I'm like, revival is here. It is happening all around us. And yes, there are different pockets of geographical regions. The Lord loves geography, but sometimes you need to go to where it is happening. If you're hungry, go to it. But I feel like as well, start doing it now. If you don't know how, so many people throughout history didn't have the theological master's doctorate degrees of like, this is how you do the kingdom. Like you look at those boys Jesus picked, like they were uneducated. They weren't the smartest cookies in the batch to sent necessarily. But I feel like that would be the big thing for me right now is revival is here. It's happening right now. The supernatural is happening all around us. We're praying for people. If you don't see them get healed, pray again. And just relentless, just over and over again.
Keep at it. Yeah.
Keep at it. That would be the big thing on my heart. But then I think that the second thing that I've really been feeling more for the church right now, and probably a larger majority of the people watching would be kind of in that kind of category on this show. But would be the parable of the virgins, the girls and the oil, has really been on my heart. I'll start crying if I talk too much about it. But this we in the charismatic world, if you've been around or been in revival meetings, whatever, you've heard people say, fire, God, all that stuff. Fire, and I love fire. It's amazing. But fire burns on oil. And oil to me, many things you could say it represents, but oil to me represents the personal intimacy and love of Jesus. Yeah. And I think we've gotten so good as a church at creating meetings and creating gatherings and creating conferences, and all of them are beautiful. They're incredible. I've encountered the Lord in so many of them. I've led so many of them. Yeah. But more than that, what the fire falls on is the oil you've prepared. And you didn't have to go and buy from somebody else. It's oil that you've pressed, you've created, or in your own time, like gathered and garnered in your own space with the Lord. And you have oil that's then ready for the fire to be burned on. Wow. And the fire revival. And I feel like many times in the Lord's mercy, He doesn't send fire until the oil is ready. Because the fire consumes, and fire's hot and it burns, and that which won't remain will be burned away, and that can be hard. But I think this intimacy, the oil for me represents the intimacy of the Lord setting the foundation, that in His kindness, He won't build a humongous house on a cracked foundation. In His kindness, He's waiting for the foundation to be set. And for our love and the greatest commandment, love the Lord your God. And that is the one thing, that is a simple thing that we build our house upon, loving Jesus with all of our heart and mind and soul. And the second is like, love your neighbor as yourself. So it has to look like something more than just church.
Now we know in revivals, they're never the same.
Never.
And God does that because He is God and He does what He pleases, but also He does that so that we can't make a pattern out of Him.
Yes.
And I've been
cheeky Jesus.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about there's no such thing as a revival that happens without prayer.
Yeah.
But I also believe, and I've been thinking about modern language and how we've seen worship and we've seen songs and we've seen the ability to free worship and prophetic worship and flow in worship sort of mature and grow in different houses and places around the world. And so my thought is, what do you think do you think maybe God is using a prayer language that's coming through in the shape of what we look at worship, that is creating and is drawing the oil and making space for the oil to prepare the way for the coming of what the Lord wants to send? And so I've just been really thinking about, why is it that God is drawing us afresh to prayer, but also to worship? And the two areas where we're seeing the most pushback, religious pushback and otherwise, is around those two areas. And I feel like maybe, do you think that worship in this season isn't just singing songs, doing a production, going through the 3 songs and getting to the actual meat, which is a word, but that worship could actually be where the actual meat is being cultivated? What do you think? I mean, that's just
No, I love it.
That's just what I'm thinking, because worship is definitely, in my discernment, worship has definitely been. It's like the Lord is pushing it to the fore, and we're making more room for it, not at the expense of other things, but definitely making more room for worship. And in your area of worship pastoring, what does that sound like to you? Do you think there's something in that?
For sure. I mean, if you look at Ezekiel or Revelation or some of these guys, like talking about the throne of God, like the throne, this begins at a throne. It began at a throne, and it will end at a throne. But out of that place, the river flows out from the temple. And I think nothing will ever replace the temple and the worship that happens. Angels right now, as we speak, in this moment, are declaring holy, holy. The cherub and the seraphim, like the elders, are throwing right now, in this moment, as we're seated in heavenly places, that is happening right now. And nothing will ever replace that. And there's I really personally believe that the songs we sing on this earth, many of them will sing in heaven. Like they'll actually carry over, where we're joining with the angelic and the cloud of witnesses and the people like worshiping at his throne. But from that place, the river flows, and the river gets deeper as you leave.
That's right.
And I feel like he's stretching us as a worshiper and someone who has given his life to the craft of music and sound and kind of sanctuary type, worship. In that place, out of the place of worship, I love it in the parable of the 10 virgins. The one right after it. So these are like the 2 parables right before Jesus is the kind of the very end, right? The plot to find Jesus, the Last Supper, all of that, and the events that lead to the cross, really, the days before. The last 2 he gives are the parable of 10 virgins in Matthew, and the one right after that is a parable of the talents. And then right after the parable of talents, he talks about this idea of like, if you give a cup of water to the least of these, if I was naked, if I was hungry, if I needed help, and if you did that in my name, you did it for me. And his disciples were like, when did we see you naked? When did we see you in prison and we didn't visit you? When did we see you hungry and we didn't feed you? Thinking, Jesus, you've never been in prison that we know of. What are you talking about? And he's like, no. If you do it for the least of these, you do it for the people that you pass by on the streets, the people that you're disgruntled with at work, the people that you're frustrated with, those sorts of things. You do it, and you do it for them. Like you do it as like an act of worship to me. And I think he's redefining what worship looks like. I love sanctuary worship. Nothing will ever take its place. And it has to start and end there. I really do believe it has to start and end there. And I believe that sound will draw people to the sanctuary, because, man, when you see him on the throne, you're done. But out of that place, an act of worship is clothing the naked. It's feeding the hungry. It's washing the dirty. It's giving a cup of water to the least of these. It's those sorts of things. And he's quite intense about it. He says, if you didn't do that, he'll say, "Depart from me, wicked and evil servant."
So in a sense, to see him is to see them.
Yes.
You can't see God, encounter God, and come into that place with him without recognizing that's where you need to be. That's what worship looks like.
Absolutely. And when you really see him, when you get that moment in worship where it's just glory, like you just like, oh my gosh, I have a picture of my beautiful, beautiful Jesus. And out of that place, there's an exchange that happens where you get his heart and you realize that he loves the world. And out of that place, I believe a genuine encounter produces the fruit of now go, now leave, now river, run deeper out of the sanctuary, go into all the worlds, make disciples, right? In Jerusalem, Samaria, and all the ends of the earth. And I believe it's from that place, out of the place of worship, when you really see him, how could you not but go out and tell people about him, wherever you're at all the time.
So true worship is really not achieved until you touch the hem of his garment, until you get face to face and you get his heartbeat. Isn't that just the most beautiful preparation? True
easy.
worshipers will worship in spirit and in truth.
Authenticity,
Yeah. Wow, that's so good.
Yeah,
I can honestly feel in my spirit that we can't get away from worship at the moment, and I think it's not just for church. It's not just so we can get this program done, but I just feel like there's much more to it. Now, you're in Australia, obviously, and you've been here a number of times, and I'm so glad you finally got over the ditch to get to Tasmania, and I'm so glad you're here.
It's a beautiful ditch.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's a beautiful Tasmania.
Yeah, exactly.
but just in the few minutes we've got left, what do you have in your heart? What do you think God's saying to Australia at the moment?
Yeah. I love this land so much. It was one of my first trips about a decade ago. My first kind of itinerant trips internationally, where I brought a team with me and did stuff in churches and then out of the church as well. I feel like there's a sound in this land. I'll say sound loosely. I don't just mean on the piano or on the guitar. No. I mean the sound of a wind inside of a people. And I feel like what the Lord has already done, there's been movements that have started here that have literally shaken the world. Yeah. And you just geographically, you're a little bit remote. You're a little bit removed from like the Europe or Asia, Africa, those sorts of things. You have to cross an ocean to get here. Literally, I had a 16-hour flight with my little 1-year-old. Woo! Praise the Lord. But I think in those places, the Lord just loves visiting places that are potentially unsuspecting, or he was born in Bethlehem, and people were unsuspecting of that, and I think he loves inhabiting those places, and that's what I feel when I'm here. When even though it's remote, even though it's like maybe a long flight to get to the rest of the rest of the kind of the world, it feels significant. And I feel his heartbeat for this land. Yeah. I've always been taken with kind of the First Nations people of Australia and New Zealand, if I'm honest. But I love the sound musically of the land, the drums coming back, those sorts of things. But then this connecting to like God's original intent of this land and this people, and setting aside, and this idea of embracing your own identity outside of trying to replicate somebody else.
Yes.
Like outside of trying to produce something that looks like something else, like trying to be another church, another denomination. No, like embracing your authenticity as Aussies, as in specifically like people in Tasmania. Yep. Like those like embracing your identity. And for me, unity without the diversity of the kingdom is conformity. But if we can embrace our diversity, embrace our differences, and actually celebrate this is who we are, regardless of your skin color, where you've come from, regardless of your creed or your family name, but we all unite under the banner of Jesus. Amen. In our differences. That creates unity, and unity by its nature is our differences coming together. And I really feel like for Australia, in particular, even coming out of COVID, because you guys had some of the strictest lockdowns, maybe not in Tasmania, but Melbourne, some other places had some very strict lockdowns. And I feel like the Lord, where the enemy meant to shut up and to block and to isolate, the Lord is coming in to connect. And he's coming in a moment and bringing people together and gathering. I feel like there's a rumor and a whisper of a sound that's happening here. Yeah. I've been to numerous churches, and I'm like, the Lord is moving in this land. Yeah. That's why I come. That's why I fly.
Something is happening.
It is just true. Yeah. It's true. So I'm excited for it. I'm excited to be a part of it. Yeah. I genuinely love this land. I love this people.
Well, we're looking forward to tonight. We're having a fantastic encounter night at Central Campus, and we're just believing that that a part of the ripping open of what God has for us will tonight, even in the space of that, come together. Great. Love you, my friend, and it's so good to have you with us. And what a wonderful time just chatting about the things of the Lord.